Hi there, and welcome to Author Conversations. And yes, again, I'm Christa, but this time I'm joined by best-selling memoir author, television host, recovering advocate, Christa Jan Ryan. Now, for decades, Christa has designed spectacular landscapes for some of the wealthiest homes in the Hamptons. Yet, behind the beauty, she reads another reality, one that I think about over her own life. Now, her best-selling memoir,
Right. Actually, it's an award-winning bestseller.
her award-winning best-selling memoir, Silent Screams in the Hamptons, was an honest account of childhood trauma, addiction, abuse, survival, and ultimately freedom. It reached #1 in Amazon, inspired a stage version, and continues to resonate with readers who have experienced difficult family life or addiction. Now, today we'll discuss how childhood shapes adulthood, why success, extreme happiness, what recovery really looks like, and why telling the truth, well, it can sometimes save a life. So after that introduction, Christa, welcome to all the conversations. It's great to have you here.
Well, thank you, Chris. I really appreciate it. If you could have seen me scrambling to get this on, because I'm actually in the throes of editing my next book that's coming out. But and I just kicked the editor out of the house because I needed to, get myself organized. So thank you for having me on. I know it's a very big topic nowadays, basically addiction, but we all know addiction. It's around us. We know somebody who's attached to addiction in our family, our friends. But I think what I've been doing, a lot of my work now that I've been doing has been working with the trauma that has propelled the addiction. And I was asked to write for a magazine called, it's called Counsel, and it is probably one of the largest addiction magazines in America. And one of the things that, we can all sit around and talk about 12-step programs, but one of the things that has been helped with my healing has been to understand what propelled my addiction. And so, unfortunately, I was a person that came out of a very highly traumatic upbringing, and it's not a different story than most people. The only thing, as my publisher had said, is that I bookended it perfectly because I had triplet sisters who were all born with cerebral palsy. And usually when I get to that part, people are like, what? Say that again? So, and my parents were very high profile people. My mother was a phys ed teacher coach who worked with kids to go on to the Olympics. My father was a pilot. They did not have the tools or the skills to be able to deal with the impact that having that happen to our family. There were an older brother and an older sister, then there were triplets, and then there was me. So I was number 6. And I always laugh when I hear somebody's the last because I know you get away with the most. But my parents had no coping skills. They drank, they drugged. There was a lot of domestic violence, as you can imagine, because of the heated stress that was in my life. And I would say by the time I was 3 years old, I was running for cover. And all of the normal things that a child should be getting at that time, love, safety, acknowledgement, just basic safety things that you want to give a child, I didn't get them. And so that set the stage of high anxiety, extremely high anxiety. And then there was the trauma of growing up and watching the physical violence play out between my parents. And nobody's really talking about it. But one of the biggest components I found because of my recovery is after the domestic violence would come the makeup sex. And, after a long time, I started thinking about, like, what is up with this? They're beating the crap out of each other. And then all of a sudden they're having makeup sex. And it was actually a company from London, Rich Woman magazine, that explored the psychodrama, psychosomatic aspect of what happens in a domestic violence situation. And it made so much sense to me now after the fact. So as an early childhood, it's just set the stage for a lot of trauma, a lot of anxiety. And I guess I was about 5 years old, and the anxiety level was so high in the household. I don't know what the fight was or what was going on, but I actually knocked back one of my parents' whiskey sours that was hanging around. And I just felt this just like relaxing relief come over me. My heart stopped palpitating. I could like relax. And I thought, wow, this is magic, right? So, needless to say, I didn't stop there. And of course, as the situation unfolded and it got worse, of course, I grew to love the fact that I could take something that would relieve the anxiety and the stress of what was going on in the atmosphere of our household. So, and then when you understand that you're not getting, and this is where I am now, when you did not get what you needed as a child to develop fully, and that's the work I'm doing on my inner child, you start developing behavior patterns that are not conducive to really fully functioning out in society as we know it. And a lot of it's codependency, the compliant cowgirl, codependency that starts to shift, shape, and make your decisions, your behavior, your friends, your decisions. And so what ends up happening is by the time I was 13, I was a I would say I was a full blown alcoholic. Like I couldn't get through the day without drinking or drugging. And at that point, I had thrown away probably about 7 years of dance. And also I had thrown away a lot of years of piano so that I could continue up the pace of partying with my friends. So it did. It shaped the whole alcoholism and drug addiction, trauma component. Not that I was of it, but it shaped what I had become. And unfortunately, my parents held a very good persona, of which I continued to try to impress upon the authorities that what they saw on the outside was what was not going on in the inside. Nobody bought it. Nobody believed it. My mother was a high profile teacher. I mean, nobody, they used to call me Sarah Bernhardt, because I would be trying to explain to them, like we're not safe at home. House would be catching on fire, car crashes would be happening. And, you could really get a good representation of the barometer of what was really going on by watching the triplets, because they felt very vulnerable to begin with. And then you throw into these episodes that, it would throw anybody over the edge if you were a young child. I mean, I've raised two children. I know when you're not in safety, the kids pick it up immediately. So those were kind of the components that started and shaped my, I call it my drinking career, but and it went on for a long time. It went on for a long time, and I guess I was a high functioning because I was able to get through school very well. But in the end, after the whole school thing was over, those are when you make important decisions that help you into your young adulthood. And that's where it got dicey. That's where I can actually say, I mean, I survived it. I got through it, but I don't recommend it. I don't recommend it at all. So, but it worked out. I was able to move on to different directions, and lot of learning curves, lot of lessons. I don't call them mistakes anymore. That's what I try to do with my children. I try to say, well, sounds like you're in a really big, high learning curve. Sounds like you might be heading towards a train wreck, so you might want to turn that curve the other direction so you don't end up in the train wreck. And that's all I'll say, because my kids are old enough that I don't want to give advice. They're old enough to figure it out. They should be figuring it out. I figured it out. Nobody helped me. I do, and I am very gentle with them when I know that danger is approaching. But so that's kind of what ended up shaping a lot of silent screams from the Hamptons, which has really gotten a big buzzword of trauma going, because in that trauma, a lot of people can't get past the triggers. A lot of people can't get past the victimization. And basically, it boiled down to, I don't want to live like this anymore. And so I had a couple of things that happened that really brought me to a bottom. And I joke that I had trapdoors in my bottoms, and my one bottomed, I went sideways for about 5 years. So, well, and things will happen the way they need to happen. I mean, I don't really want to say right now that my life had been orchestrated, because I made some really bad choices and decisions, but I always felt the hand of God. Now that I can look back, the hand of God protecting me. And one of the things I've always learned since I've returned back to my faith, because one of the really heartbreaking things that happened to me as a child was, at a very early age, 8, I picked up on the hypocrisy of my Christian parents and the hypocrisy of the Christian church that was intervening. And it really set the tone for the rest of my life. Because at that point, what do you know at 8? Not much, but you're intuitive, you're sensitive, you're recognizing 2 and 2 is not equal 4. I'm thinking now 2 and 2 might be 3. I walked away from God, and I wanted nothing to do with anything that had anything to do with that. And that stayed with me for a long time. And did it shape a lot of my attitude? Absolutely. Did it shape a lot of my decisions? Absolutely. But one of the things I've learned is that no matter how bad, how hard, how far down you have gotten, when you surrender, you surrender. And that's where usually a power higher than yourself or greater than yourself, who I, want to call God, will meet you. And so those are some really elemental things that shaped my childhood. And yeah.
Well, that's quite amazing. I mean, it's no wonder that your book is, it starts off really extraordinary, honestly, and I can see why, because that's the kind of person you are, right? You've just come and told us that, so we really got a big picture of it. But I can't help but think. I mean, was there ever a point where you really decided not to publish all those details because, well, basically, it revealed too much about your family, especially if they were high profile?
Well, it became a challenge, because I would go in. Well, first of all, my parents. My mother had one sibling who played a major role in my life, thank God, and my grandmother. And my aunt actually brought me into her gardening realm and taught me how to garden when I was 7 years old. My father was also very interested in gardening. So, and my grandmother came in and took care of me when I was young enough, where my mother had to get back to work and my father worked, and there had to be somebody. So I was really grateful it was my grandmother. But what happened is, it was kind of funny, but not really. I would complain to them. I would complain to my aunt and my grandmother all the time what was going on. And their denial was so great. But I also think, because my mother was a very powerful woman, she was an extremely powerful woman. And so you can imagine a powerful alcoholic. So wasn't that they were afraid of her, but they were also conflict avoidant. So when you're conflict avoidant, you are not going to go head to head with somebody who is pretty powerful, right? So they did the smartest thing that they only knew what to do, which is they removed me from the situation and made sure that, because I mean, I put up a stink. I mean, at that point, I'm like stomping my feet. I'm like, the house was on fire last night. Mom had a car crash the other night. And they're all like looking at me as much to say, is she making it up? I mean, what wonderland is she in? Like and so they started to realize when the newspaper articles started coming out, it's terrible to say, and I can laugh now because we are all safe, but standing there reading an article that your daughter or your sister had just been in a car crash or the house had been on fire, they started to understand, like, wow, we've got something major on our hands. And so they played a big role on being able to, but the real part I had a hard time going up against was the church, who, oh my gosh, because my parents served in the church, they did not want to hear about it. They were like, oh, I think you better go home and have a sit with your parents and talk through this. And I'm like, no, because by the time I get home, the whiskey sour shakers are going to be going, and by 1 o'clock, they're going to be off to the races, bombed out of their brain cells. So they didn't want to hear it. And the school, oh my gosh, I was like stepping on territory. My mother was a teacher. My mother was so well respected in the school system. And I'm coming in telling on my mother. And my sister and brother at this point, they were out. They were like, they had nothing to do with it. So I was left with these poor triplets. And so I just basically ended up going off on my own. And I laugh and joke about it. But by the time I was 10 years old, I was riding my sister's bike uptown because I had a little business, because we had no money, because my parents basically drank it away, and the triplets cost so much money. And there was another, crutch to buy, and there was another wheelchair to buy, so there was no disposable income. And at 10, I wanted skis, I wanted a bike, I wanted things, right? So it got me off to realizing that the only way I was going to get it was to go off and start doing it by myself and earning the money, the capital. So then I made the decision to go off, and it was lonely. It was lonely because I felt like my opinion didn't count. What I had to say didn't matter. Nobody believed me. So the heck with that. I just kind of get everything to myself and had to figure things out. Like, what was the next safest thing to do? At 10, kids at 10 want to play with dolls, So it was premature in a lot of the ways that I had to grow up fast. But, I'm working towards this 2 film productions of the silent screams from the Hamptons, and working with a producer also about my upcoming book that's supposed to be coming out. And, he was so nice at the end of it, because he did he did read Silent Screams, and he did read a portion of the book that I'm getting ready to release now. And he said to me, he says, I just want to say one thing. And I thought, oh, here we go. Here comes the shoe. I'm waiting for the shoe to drop, right? We're always waiting. He says, I just want to say one more thing. I said, okay, Matthew, what is it that you'd like to say? And it was earnest, and it was compassionate. And I could tell he was saying it was with empathy. He said, I just want to say, I am so sorry for everything you had to go through as a child. And I thought, you know what, Matthew? Don't be, because you know what? It's made me into the hard-ass, diligent, hard-ass person that I am today, the hardworking, the empathetic person. It's created and helped me evolve into what I never got, into recognizing how I can be of assistance to that in society with other people, because I can spot it. I can spot it when a kid's being neglected. I can spot when somebody is having a really bad day, or they're trying to hide something. I mean, I won't go up and shake them like, what's wrong? But I try to be an atmosphere where people feel safe with me. I never had that. I certainly never had that. And respect and listen to what they have to say, instead of saying, oh, that's ridiculous. Oh, well, that can't be. Oh, that, No, this is their truth. They're speaking their truth. And as a child, that was never allowed. I was never allowed to speak my truth. So now it's really important to me. It's really important that I not only speak and write my truth, but that it's important for other people to understand how important it is for them to be able to speak their truth and to acknowledge that their truth is their truth. Whatever it is, it doesn't matter to me, but that's their truth. And I need to respect that. Anybody needs to respect that, right? I mean, you don't see it in society.
They don't, and people don't really respect it. It's all about them. It's all about very selfish, I think.
Oh, yeah.
And you having to grow up so early, having to take on all that responsibility at that age, going out to earn money to look after your children, siblings, it's just, I mean, good on you. But I think that one of the issues here, I think, is about how children are not listened to. I don't know how you got through that, where you're telling people what's happening, but they just didn't believe you. I mean, your family didn't believe you. Obviously, the school system didn't believe you. No one else you told ever believed you. So they must have had this opinion of you that you were just making it all up, like you said, right? Some drama queen or whatever. But this is the whole point, isn't it? This is why you're helping people now, because they didn't get the opportunity to be, also you didn't get the opportunity to be able to have a shoulder to cry on, effectively, I guess.
Yeah, that it can happen. And so there's a term I've used. It's interesting that what comes out of all this, because I'm now realizing I have coined a lot of different phrases, and the process is identification by association. And I find that people, children, young adults, if they can identify with what you've gone through or what you're saying, it gives them that feeling of association, like I'm not alone, like I can belong to something, like there is a solution. So as a child, I never was taught how to problematically figure out solutions because everything was a crisis. Everything was a crisis. Nobody got into the solution, right? So what ends up happening now is I'm very solution oriented. And a lot of my writing reflects how I try to help people to understand that you can identify, it's okay, and what you're feeling is real, and how you're able to really come to the understanding and conclusion that if I was able to do it, why can't they? And to earnestly show them, and I do that in all my books, I earnestly show them the steps that I took that helped me out of my dilemma. Is it all going to be all their steps? No, it's not. Everybody's going to have a path. Everybody's going to do different steps. But here's the one important thing I will never, ever forget. I homeschooled my children because I was oh my gosh, the school system was a dinosaur. And I just couldn't do it anymore. And so I homeschooled my children, and I had to make this decision. And I went into this charter school, and I was evaluating the school. It was a charter school, and I thought, and I hit it off with the principal really well. And I said something which I am so grateful that I spoke up again. And I said, well, Steve's name was Steve Berman. I said, Steve, I'm a big help advocate. I like to get my hands up in the air and ask for help. And he looked at me because my family buried our family because they couldn't ask for help. But what that man said to me, I have carried for 40 years. He said to me, Christa, to not ask for help is to not allow yourself to grow. Whoa. I was like, whoa, like that blew my mind, right? When you put it like that, people, suffer with picking up the phone. People suffer from like spilling out what's wrong. People suffer. They keep it inside of them. They get sick. But when he said that to me, I thought, wow, I mean, what an advantage to understand the less I ask for help, the less I'm going to grow. Right?
Yeah, exactly. So it actually must have helped you as well. Because so
Well,
that was that.
it validated and solidified that it's okay to ask for help. Yo, the house is on fire. Yo, I can't. So it just validated everything. And I know, because I've worked in the recovery arena for 22 years, people want to be validated. People want to be validated. Yes, it happened to you. It was real. I had a prison ministry for 10 years. I have to tell you, I learned more about myself and my interaction with the human race with these guys that I worked with in prison for 10 years. It was like probably one of my biggest growth spurts in my life. I had to drop my self-righteousness. I had to drop my judgmental. I had to drop the idea that I thought I knew. I had to drop the idea that, oh, this happened because that happened. And you know what, if you do that, then this is going to happen. Well, open up the window, throw that right out, because that A plus B did not equal C. And so when I gleaned that and understood it, I was like, wow. And all I did with these guys was validate them. I didn't want to hear about their incarcerations. I didn't want to hear about why they were in there. It didn't matter to me. Didn't matter. They were there. What are you doing about it now? And the reason why they were there with me is because they were working a recovery program to gain the skills and the tools on what they needed to do when they got out. Duh. Hello. What a concept, right?
Yeah, exactly.
What a concept.
Yeah, well, they couldn't have asked for help from somebody, as well, experienced and well, you basically, because you've done the whole thing.
Right. So
come out of that childhood like
so that just kind of propelled my ability to work in the arena of recovery even more, because I started to understand that how you get to recovery, how you get to your bottom, it matters. It matters. And it's painful. And yes, you have to acknowledge it. But the big question is, what are you going to do now? You're here. You're at the bottom. What do you want to do? I went sideways for 5 years. I don't recommend. But, what do you want to do to help yourself? And so that's always been a big aspect in my life when I work with people. I accept it, I validate it, I listen, I try my best to be as empathetic as possible. I understand the concept of victimization and where it can take you mentally. But I always ask, the one question I always asked, which really got the guys going, how many of you want to go? How many of you want to get out? The hands would go up. How many of you guys want to come back? And they'd be like, they'd have to think about that. It's like, so are you willing to do what it takes not to come back? And that's the same concept that you give the person in recovery or who is at an emotional bottom. What do you want to do so that you never have to end up here? Suicidal, ready to kill somebody, homicidal, suicidal. It happens. It happens. People can allow their emotions. So the question then becomes is, what do you want to do? What do you want to do to get yourself out of this situation? How hard do you really want to work? Do you want to take a pill? Do you want somebody to do it for you? Do you want to do the work that it takes to get yourself out of here and not come back?
and how many of them think, yeah, which, because I do agree, obviously, we all want to put up with choices like that. We want to take the right choice, but to do it, it takes a So you worked with those prisoners all the way through that journey to help them. So, I mean, are there success stories you can share with us? Obviously.
Well, I have one guy, I have to tell you, this is just an he's really an exclusive. A lot of them have stayed out. This guy's story should be a film. He was blowing his brains out, his father's brains out, and then his mother's brains out at 12 years old. Ran and lived in a cave for about it took, came out, and miracle upon miracle started unraveling because he did the right thing. All his dreams, all his hopes, everything that he ever wanted to do, because he stayed on the path and didn't allow the triggers to propel his decisions, didn't allow the triggers to move him and keep him in the behavior that he was so accustomed to. Today, he's a fine upstate. He is now the chief of the fire department in one of the towns here, and runs the town program for the actual keeping the town green. And he's under that's under his authority. Has it been easy for him? No. He's about ready to embark upon getting his pilot's license. Now,
would that have happened if he had met you?
I don't think it's me. I really think it's because I really feel that if it hadn't been me, there would have been somebody else, possibly, because there were groups of people there. But what ends up happening is you give him the choices, he makes the right choice because he understands there's consequences to bad decisions. And, guys used to greet me at the prison and they used to say, "You'll never guess what I learned today." I'm like, "I have no idea." Or this week or whatever. I'd be like, "I have no idea." And I'd be like, "Oh God, I hope it's not how to pick the lock." And because your mind can always go to where they could go. He goes, "I learned how to pick up the phone and ask for help today." And I was like clapping, shaking, like hallelujah, right? He says, "Something happened and I picked up that phone and I called somebody. And so I didn't punch the guy out or choke him." And I was like, "Good on you, man." Right? Because that's the natural thing. You want to choke somebody, you want to beat the crap out of them. He says, "I ran to the phone and I picked up the phone and I asked for help." And I was like, wow, And it was at that point I thought, well, maybe I am making a difference, because you don't know what comes in, you don't know what, and then there was this whole busload of the guys that came in. Oh my God, very heartbreaking. And they had just come back from Boston. And they were, and I don't want to talk too much about this, but they had just been bussed in to go on trial to stand up against the priests that had sexually molested them when they were very young children. Kept me everything I had to keep from crying. Thinking, little young altar boy wants to be in there serving God. Little candle boy wants to just, do the right thing. And he gets sexually molested by the priest in charge. And these guys, you probably heard the case that's been going on. It's, it's a big case. These guys were bussed into Boston to go on trial. I'm talking like 12 guys. That's a pretty high percentage of inmates going in that had been sexually, so then you think to yourself, holy crap. If they had been sexually molested, what's the residue left from that? No wonder they're acting out. No wonder they're in jail. No wonder they're stealing. Doesn't mean it's right. They didn't have a mother or a father or a relative or an aunt or a grandmother like I had, and they were left to their own devices. But the anger and the violation that goes along with any kind of rape or sexual abuse is horrific. And what I ended up learning through the whole aspect is I realized that the most important thing for them is that to teach them that they were not responsible for what happened to them. Because a lot of them think, oh, if I hadn't done this, if I hadn't done that, if I hadn't gone over to... No, that has nothing to do with it. So you get to see some pretty horrific things when you're in the recovery world. And it's shaped a lot of my perception that I understand that we're living in a world where my story, which was horrific, was kind of a walk in the park compared to some of these guys. Consider, I haven't even gotten to the female women that I've worked with. And so everything I can make this, everything in your childhood shapes that whole development of what you can become to what you do become. And it's just, and unfortunately, we're living in a world today where it's just not great. It's just not, parents are busy, parents are drunk, parents are beating up each other, parents are high, it's so hard for a child nowadays to get a break unless they feel a real desire to want to be able to rise above.
We're talking about resilience here in terms of your life. Talking about like some of these people that you worked with to be able to build their own resilience.
Exactly.
Those people who were being thrust into that trial, that's got to be tough as well. And as you say, it's a big percentage. How do you think that if you're from a family that suffers or feels trapped, you feel trapped by addiction, or whatever it is, what would you say to those people if they're watching this? What's your advice?
Okay, so there is no situation, none, that I'm going to get teared up. There is no situation that you can't heal from. There is no burden that is so great that you will never be released from. That basically what boils down in every single human being's life is the fact that we have a destiny, and our destiny does not be predetermined by who we are. We do not have to be defined by what happened to us. And that took me a long time to understand that didn't have to define what my future was going to be. That the choices that I have to make, that I can make, that I should be making, are what's going to help me get along and move forward in my life. But one of the aspects that I am so grateful for is that I was able to ask for help. And I have found that with all that we have created, and I don't know about London, but all I know about what goes on in our own little community is that there are so many places you could walk into and say, I need help. I don't have a meal. I don't have a place to stay. I'm an addict. I'm an alcoholic. I can't go home anymore. My parents are dangerous. I know of 5 places right now that I know of that people can come in, maybe 6 places, maybe 7 hotlines that they can call, because we're set up for it now. This is like the norm. So each person has to get to that point. It's not pleasant, believe me. I don't like it when I'm in there. It's a point of brokenness where we learn to surrender and ask for help and take the initiative and the desire to want to go and get help. I mean, I have seen cases, I have worked through cases, that left me in tears and left me to think, I didn't say it, but I think, oh my God, I don't know how they're going to get out of this one. And miracles would start unraveling. Certain things would start happening because we can't control the way things work outside of our own little realm. And, I'm a big God advocate, and I know that God works all things to the good of those who love him. And you can shoulder God with a lot of responsibility that normally the person would shoulder all by themselves and would probably crack them. So I just feel like the most important thing I can leave anyone with is that there is nothing that you can't do, nothing that nobody can't help you, that there's so much help out there. You have to understand, when you get sick and tired of being sick and tired and you're willing to go out there and do something about your situation, I know there's help out there. I know it. I've seen it. I got it. I got the help. And I'm in a situation now where I'm working and helping other people and empowering them. Because you know what? I can't do it for them. They're the only ones that can do it for them. And by empowering them, they understand that they do have control over the situation. Most people grow up. I grew up. There was no control of anything in my household. I mean, it was like, holy crap, what's going to happen next? So when you relinquish the control in a surrender, you're able to actually realize that you do have control over the consequences of what's going to happen next, because you're asking for help. You're getting it out there. It's your choice. And I don't think a lot of people understand that they are the ones that become empowered, and they are the ones that are going to be able to change themselves. It's not going to be little old me. It's not going to be that little old support group. It's not going to be a book. It's going to be them wanting to do the work necessary to not stay around and on the bottom that they're at.
And I think you mentioned earlier on about victimhood, about themselves, but they have to be shown the option that that's what you're saying.
That it can be done. And I'm not alone. I mean, I'm not alone. I'm not this person. No, I just took what it was necessary. The reason why I wrote was my very first book, which was about the death of my daughter. You want to talk about a bottom? That's the bottom. I moved sideways for 5 years. If I hadn't used the tool of writing, I don't know where I'd be. So I'm a big journaler. One of the things I really try to impress upon people is to journal. Write your thoughts. It becomes real, because when you write things out, you own it. And when you go back and look at that, you're like, wow, I really felt that. Wow, I really thought that. Wow. So what ends up happening is we develop tools. And so for me, it was the ability of learning how to transpose my hurts, my habits, my hang-ups, all of the victimization that I had into a proper place so I could start to get a perspective of it. What was my part in it? How did I react? What was the right thing? I mean, there's so much that happens to you when you start taking the initiative to start utilizing tools that are out of your comfort zone, because you are where you are because you didn't have the tools and you didn't have the ability to be able to understand how to stop what was happening to you. So it's not little old me. And I'm here to empower the next person who wants to kill themselves, who wants to go out and get shit-facing drunk, who wants to just whatever. You have the power. You have the power to control where, what, and how you want to make that next decision to fulfill your destiny.
And you're right, if people feel that that the wings of life, basically, that they don't get the opportunity to choose for themselves ever, then allowing them to do that, or maybe making it more obvious that they can do that, has got to help. So, but listen, we're actually quickly running out of time here. Unfortunately, I think this is age. Maybe we could talk about it for a long time, because what you're basically doing is paying forward to people who, because, and I think you should think about this a bit really, you've gone through all of that childhood trauma, which you put down in scientific answers. And at the end of the day, you had a 40-year at least career that spanned in different kind of ways. Right? So you've been a TV host, award-winning, you've been what landscape planner, you've done all sorts of things that actually have really needed resilience, focus, and level-headedness in order to achieve. And you've been a mother, right? So you
Oh
have
yeah,
children.
my greatest
You've done all of this.
my greatest lessons. I always say my children were my most powerful teachers. And they still are. They're 35 and 30. They're still teaching me stuff. But I have to be willing to listen. I have to be willing to do the work. It's not like the lessons come and I'm like, oh, no, I have to be willing. My part is being willing. And, it's been a wild ride, and I get really teared up. But to be able to say you're grateful for the whole ride at this point, that is the blessing. That is the blessing. And I just feel that my part in it was the fact that I was able to get out my hand and ask for help and decide that I didn't want to live like this any longer. There had to be something better. And I just made that decision, stuck with it, and stayed with it until I was able to get through enough healing. And the healing will come.
Because suddenly, but I guess you feel that your work, so you understand that your own self-worth that. So that.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for having me on. It was a great show. I wanted to thank you for a great show. I'm looking forward to seeing the link again. And I just, if you could write in my website where people can get in touch with me, that's great. And, I just released The Compliant Cowgirl, which is a book about codependency. Silent Screams is about addiction. And From the Depth of This Woman's Soul is about the loss of a child. And the book I'm working on right now is How to Navigate in the Community when your child falls into addiction. That's my new book coming out.
Well, thank you for telling us about that. And why don't you tell us about your website? How can people get in touch with you? How can people look at what you do?
Okay, so it's www.books by, and then it's just my first and second name, ChristaJan.com. So it's www.booksbychristajan.com. And if, I don't know where else you could reach me. If you want to pull up a lot of my TV shows are on my website, which is a beautiful website. A lot of my gardening pictures of 45 years are on there. I've been putting a lot of interviews, some really amazing interviews. Two of them, which were out of London, which I was really excited about. I'm actually thinking of, I have a literary agent that's interested in this next book who's out of London, who's really interested in the book. So I guess London's where it's at, so.
London's very hot right now. So Christa Jan Ryan, thank you so much for and sharing your incredible story. I mean, at times super emotional from your own point of view, and at other times super emotional thinking about the people that you're helping. And I think that Silent Screams from the Hamptons is a remarkably honest conversation about trauma, addiction, resilience, and hope, and family problems. I mean, obviously,
it's all about the family. I call it the family of origin, because we all have a family of origin, and I carry that through all of my writings, because I always go back and forth about where and how the family of origin is doing. They didn't get help. They're drowning, and it's been very sad for me to watch as an adult. That the nobody got help. Nobody wanted help. Nobody wanted to do anything about their situation. And it's really apparent. So, but the old expression, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make him drink. So the water's there, the well is full, and it's really divine. So I would think people would want to get there and slurp it up. So,
but yeah, well, that's the important point, I think. Going to it, and it can happen, and it can still turn out to be a success, even when people part of it. So everybody, listen, thank you for watching and listening to all the conversations. I've been Christa Jan, but if you'd like to learn more about Christa, her television work, or the best-selling memoir, check out her website, which we'll put down as well. One more time, Christa, what's the website address?
It is www.books, BOOKS, by Christa Jan, all lowercase.com. And there you'll be able to see the whole Danny from, I want to give a plug for Danny from Auto Books, really did an incredible job putting it all together. He accumulated 45 years of my career in one website. So that was really great to look at. Because I kept saying I did all that. Oh my gosh, I did all that. But it started with it started with asking for help. Simple thing.
That's the thing I'm going to take. Yeah, that's the thing I'm going to take away.
Yeah.
That it's not shameful to ask for help. It's not bad to ask for help. In fact, it's bad not to ask for help.
You don't allow yourself to grow by not asking for help. Who doesn't want to grow? Who doesn't want to grow?
Exactly. Who doesn't want to grow?
Right.
Well, viewers and listeners, listen, if you've enjoyed this episode, please subscribe, leave a review on your favorite podcast platform, and share this conversation with someone.
Well, yeah, and check me out on Facebook. Facebook, Christa Jan Ryan. I have a fan page and big page with I post everything there. So check me out on Facebook. Tell me where you heard me or met me or whatever. So that would be great.
Brilliant. Well, I look forward to all of this happening for you. And Christa, I hope we meet again in the future with your other books. But thanks for listening. And I'll see you guys in the next episode of All the Conversation. Christa Jan Ryan, it's been incredibly good. And I hope you have a great rest of the day.
Thanks, Chris.
If you enjoyed this conversation, you can watch more author conversations here.